Hey everybody, today we are looking at something really quite special. We're going to be building a player list and then selecting one player to be selected for something. So this is a piece of a game mechanic. We're not going to teach like a full game mechanic, but an example of this being in use is in The Village by Euphoria. And so in The Village, one user is selected to be the killer, or I think the tagger. they changed the name. It used to be Murder Village for those of you keeping track. And so anyway, in this awesome world, you get selected and then you get teleported. And so we want to define how do we select someone and what are all the kind of like steps to make that work. And so it's actually relatively simple. We're going to start by heading into build mode. And I like to define what I'm thinking about. How does this work? And so the first thing I want to do is just kind of define a space. And we'll fast forward this for everybody watching. I'm kind of imagining like this is the lobby space, right? And then this, so lobby, and then we have like gameplay spaces over here. And so you imagine this might be like the murder zone, and this is the not murder zone. And to really emphasize this, we will stretch this up nicely. Select, duplicate, slide, and slide. Okay. Now this isn't perfect, I know, but there we have it. Here's where we will have people get queued up, and then the person who is it will get teleported here, and everybody else will get teleported here. Now in this space, you can have whatever you need to make it so that they actually function as it. That could be a weapon like a water blaster. It could be any assortment of things, a wand, etc. Whatever it is that they need to be it can be placed here, and then everybody over here can have whatever they need to be doing whatever they're going to do. So now that we've kind of defined what does the space look like, the next thing we need to think about is what do we need to make this happen from a scripting standpoint? And the answer is quite simple. We need a script, we need 2 spawn points, and we need a trigger. So the trigger is quite the easiest. And so actually, if you haven't seen this before, this comes out tagged sometimes. And if you click on it, it deselects it. So when it's selected, that's the one you'll spawn in at. And when it's unselected, that's not the one you'll spawn in at. And so from the properties panel, we also want to turn off spawn on start. So I'm going to quickly go ahead and turn off spawn on start and then duplicate a second copy of this and then place these in the respective rooms. So here we go. I'm not making this perfect, but you get the idea. So there we go. Now this trigger is going to go into this space here. And so we'll slide that to there, slide this to here. And as long as you're standing in this room, you can be selected to be it. And I apologize for the flicker there. I'm going to quickly fix that. I usually fix this by just changing the scale slightly, like 2.4, 2.0, and there we go. Okay, so now we're going to slide this down. So now that we have this trigger that defines the space that you need to be in to get selected, we now need a script that'll keep track of who's in the trigger. This is actually pretty easy to do. If you haven't done this before, no worries. I'm going to walk you through it pretty straightforward and easy. The first thing we're going to do is name this script, which is going to be called select them. Sure, this is a fine name. So we've got select them, and we're going to start on our variables tab. I'd like to define what are the variables we're going to need. So we'll click a new variable, and the first thing we need to do is create a player list. So player is the type, and list is selected, so it's a list of players, and we'll call these plids in trigger. And then now that we've got the plids and trigger, we'll click confirm. We're also going to need to cycle through these players. And to do that, we're going to create another new variable. It's going to be identical, including list as will be selected. And then the only thing that's different is the name. And this one will be called iterator plids. Okay. So these iterator player IDs will allow us to cycle through this plids and the trigger without having to worry about updating this. We now have 2 of these, and I'll explain how we're going to use that in just a little bit. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is create new object variables for each of the spawn points. So we're going to call this one it spawn, and then we'll create another object variable called other spawn. So now we've defined the 2 locations, and we'll wire these up in a little bit. So it spawn, other spawn, and do we need anything else? I think that is it. So now we're saying when world is started, we're going to ignore this for now. We're going to keep it, but ignore it. And then under our events, so we're going to go ahead and drag over when trigger is entered by player, as well as when trigger is exited by player. And now that we have these here, we can now add and remove these players from the list as they enter and exit the trigger. So to do that, we'll go over to our operators tab, and down near the bottom, you're going to find list variables where we have add to list. We'll just go ahead and drag add to list over. There's also remove item from list. We'll drag that one over as well. So now we've got when trigger is entered, add a value to a list. When trigger is exited, remove an item from that list. And now we'll go back to our variables tab. We have the plids and trigger list. So we'll go ahead and drag this over. Filling this out on the right side, I can thumbstick to the right to duplicate. And now that we have that in there, we can just drag down the player pill into each of these slots. And now we have a list that represents all the players who are currently active in the trigger. The problem is we need to define when these players select somebody. So the only thing that we're missing here is we need to select when does this get triggered. And so I think for our purposes here, we can either use when world is started and set a delay, or we can say when trigger is entered by X number of people. And I think the X number of people is the way to go. So we'll create a new number variable called number to trigger. Trying to think what is most valuable for you guys. So let me kind of explain some of the options here so you can kind of see where my head's at. So option one is we create a button, and when you press that button, it causes the players to get teleported. The problem I don't like with that is people will press the button before everybody gets there, which can be kind of not fun. You also don't want people just like, lagged out over here not joining, and so you're like waiting for them to join. We could do a count where it's like when you have 4 players in the trigger, cause them all to teleport in. I think the other thing we could do is use when world is started and send a delay events where it's like in 60 seconds, which actually sounds like the better method. Okay, you know what? I like that a lot because it has kind of like this get ready countdown sort of pace. So we're going to create a new variable, which will be a number called countdown. So we'll go countdown. And then we're going to start this with a value of 60. And so this will represent how long does it take. And to do this multiple times, you'll either want to reset the world under your actions tab. There is a reset world state somewhere. There it is. You can reset the world state, or you'll have to set it to count down 60 again and resend the when world is started event. And so we'll go to our when world is started. And then at the top of our events tab, we can grab send event to object. And so we'll go drop that in here. And the event we're going to send is called countdown. So we'll go fill that out ourselves. Countdown. Confirm. I'm trying not to go too far because it's really easy for me to make things really complex. So I'm trying to hold back because I'm like, we could put a number value in here, but let's not do that. Okay, so when world is started, we've sent countdown to self. And then down over here, we can say when event countdown is received. And since we've already filled it out up here, we can now select it from the dropdown. And now when countdown is received, we're going to want to continue counting. And to do that, we'll send another event. So we'll send event with delay. And this event will also be countdown. And we send that after 1 second. And then we need to subtract 1 from our value. So over here on our values tab, we can grab the set to, which will drop under countdown. And what are we setting? We're setting the countdown variable. And then we're going to set that to be -1. So at the top of our operators, you're going to find a minus symbol under basic operations. We'll drag that over to the right, placing that in the value slot. So we say countdown, and then I'm going to use that thumbstick to the right trick here to value that in. And then this 1, I'm going to also duplicate up here to get it up here. So now it's countdown -1. You can also get these values from your variables tab by dragging it over, or from the values tab under number input. All right, so now that we've got this set up to count down, we also want to display it as a text on the back wall so that you know how long you've got to get into this trigger. And we want this to only send this loop when there is time left. And so what we're going to do is back on our events tab, we're going to say if, and drop that down here below this. So what we're going to do is head to the top of our operators tab, and we're going to grab the not equal symbol, dropping that into the if, and then we're going to say, as long as the countdown doesn't equal 0, we will continue looping. So we'll go ahead and type in 0 here. So countdown doesn't equal 0, then we can indent this send countdown event into the if. So now if the countdown doesn't equal 0, we'll send countdown to self after 1 second. So it's going to start at 60 and continue down until it reaches 0. And this will just display that on a text object. So we'll go to our variables tab, create a new object variable, and this will be called text object. There we go. Click confirm, and we're going to go to our actions tab and grab display text, placing that over here underneath the countdown. And then back on our values tab, you're going to find variable as string, which allows us to convert a number into a string value. And so then we can drag this countdown variable into here. And this is not displaying on self. It will actually display on the text object. So we'll make sure to drag that and replace self. Fantastic. Okay, so it's very important that we start testing these things early on to make sure it's working. Usually you want to test stuff very early and often so you can find where you make small mistakes. Like I could have easily forgotten to replace that. I almost did actually. So we're going to go and close this out. Open up our trigger here, and if you press forward and hold, it'll bring it to you. There we go. And it is currently enabled. It's triggering on players, and we're going to drop down and select the script we want to attach, which is the select them script. Now we need a text object, which I haven't brought out yet. So let's go ahead and bring out a text object. And just to kind of figure out what the scale is going to be, we're going to turn autofit off. We're going to type in the number 60, click enter, and that looks pretty good. Now we can scale this up. We're going to make sure this is very big so everybody knows what's happening in this room. And then the other thing we're going to do is grab a color of red, maybe a dark red. There you go. So you really feel the intensity burning as you're getting closer and closer to this time. So we'll go ahead and slide that in. Perfect. Open up the properties panel. And we've got our text properties panel. If you didn't see how I scaled that, it was just by that same pressing and holding forward technique. Now we're going to grab the text pill here and drag that over into text object. We've now filled it out, and look at it's actually already working. Wow, that was fast. So yeah, you can see this literally wants to work from the get-go. So very nice. There is one small problem that I'm seeing, which is that it starts at 59 and I'd like it to start at 60. So if I type in 61, it will start at 60. Very nice. And the reason that is because it starts by subtracting one here at the very beginning before displaying, so we don't get that value. So I'm actually going to fill that out here as well. Type in 61. And then if you do change a value here, to make sure it updates over here on our trigger, you want to click this X button. So like if I typed in 60, it will start at 59 again. But if I clear this out, it'll reset it to whatever the script default is. So very nice. Okay, so now that we've got a countdown that works, when this countdown is done, that's when we want to start the selecting player. And so I try to think about things in chronological order when I'm building a script. So we know when world has started, we want to start a countdown. Now we're imagining players have now entered the trigger, maybe somebody's exited the trigger. But the next thing we want to do after all of this is we want to select a player. So under our events tab, we're going to go grab when event is received, and we're going to drop down and create a custom event name. And we're going to call this select player. All right, select player, click confirm. And now when select player is received, this is when we're going to do the things, but when is this going to happen? It's going to happen when the countdown does equal 0. So if we go over to our control, we can grab else. And so if it doesn't equal 0, it continues sending countdown. When it does equal 0, it will send a different event. So we're going to go ahead and grab this and duplicate it to the right. So thumb sticking to the right, we can then drop down and select player. And then the reason I want this to send after 1 second is as you're imagining this, it'll give it kind of time to do a beep, kind of like the game timer has started. And this is kind of something else to think about when you're building your mechanics, is what makes it, quote, juicy, if I'm quoting Miles here. I think it is really important to add juice to your game or your experience, because that's what makes it so much more fun when you hear that gong go off or whatever it is. And so we're going to do that right now. We're going to add another object variable, and we're going to call this sound effects, and we'll call this tick. So this is the tick, tick, tick sound. Click confirm. And then we also want a gong sound. So we're going to go object gong. There we go. And we'll actually add that sound effects to the front of it so we know it's a sound effects. Perfect. Confirm. And then we're going to our actions tab where you're going to find play sound. We'll then bring that play sound over into here, as well into our else. And now that we have play sound in these spots, we can go back over here, dragging the tick into this spot and grabbing the gong sound into this spot. So when it hits 0, we get a nice gong, and then the players get teleported. So they get a chance to also see that it says 0. So I think that's also important here. So now select player comes on after 1 second. And when select player is received, this is where we want to cause the players to get teleported out. So there's a couple ways to do this. The way we're going to do it is using a while loop. I think while loops are definitely the way to go. You might need to, depending on the length of your list, do some other tricky things, but we're not going to get into that today. That's definitely a little bit more of an advanced topic. And so the first thing we need to do is going to our values tab at the very top, we can set to. So I remember I told you I would explain this. So under variables, we have iterator player IDs. And so the reason we call this iterator player IDs is because it's the list of player IDs that we want to iterate through, or in this case, just choose people from and remove them. So this one doesn't get affected, but this one does. So we need to drag this over to the left side. So drag that into here. And then the player IDs and trigger, we're going to drag into the right side. And as I think about this, I kind of want to select this at the moment the gong goes off. So I'm actually going to drag this up here right before we send the select player event. And so we've now set the iterator player IDs to the player IDs that are in the trigger. We now know all of the players who are standing inside this green trigger. So now when selecting the player is received, we now need to select who it is. And to do that, we're going to, and I really encourage you to do this, create a new variable, and this will be called who is it. And this will let us save that value for later in case there's anything else we need to do with that player. So who is it? Click confirm. Under our values tab, we can grab set to, and now it says when select player is received, we will set who is it. So grab who is it, place it here, and who is it going to be? This is done by going to the operators tab. Back under our list options, you're going to see there's an option for get item from list. There it is, get item from list. Drag that into here, and now you'll notice that it needs a number and the list. Now we know the list that we're using is the iterator player IDs, so I'm going to thumbstick that to the right here. So we know that we're getting some player from the iterator player IDs. The number value, if we go back to our operators tab and scroll up, is going to be a random value. So we have two options, random number with decimals and random number. Random number with decimals will not work because it has a decimal and these values are whole numbers, which is where random number comes in. This really should say random integer. So if we grab the random number, this will give us a value between 0 and 0 currently. But if we said set it to 0 and 2, this will return a value of 0 or 1 because it does not include the top value. It only includes, so it's like random integer between 0 and 2 is 0 or 1. I don't know any better way to explain it than that. So we're going to go ahead and delete 2 out of here. And then back down under lists. So we're going to see length of list right here. Now, length of list is going to give us the length of the iterator player ID list. And I want to quickly walk through this one more time just so you can fully grasp this. The iterator player IDs, say there's 4 people in this list. That's 0, 1, 2, and 3. But if it counts it, it'll say 4. So we don't need to adjust this value because it just happens to work so perfectly with this random number code. But like 0, 1, 2, and 3 are the positions that these players are in when there is 4 players. Just really worth hammering that home. Okay, so now we've selected who is it. We have solved the part that you guys wanted to see. Now we get to do all the fun stuff with it that we've already talked about. So the first thing we need to do is remove that person from the list. So now that we've selected them, we're going to remove item from list. So that's this one here. Drag that under who is it. We can then remove who is it. So you drag that and thumbstick to the right to duplicate. And what list is it? It is the iterator plids list. So we'll thumbstick to the right there, duplicate it. If you accidentally bring it down, no biggie. You can always go back the other way and do it that same thing. Or you can always head back to your variables tab to bring it over. Okay, so we've removed who is it from the list, which means this list now only contains the players who are going to be teleported there. We got the one person, that's it. It's going to be teleported over there, and everybody else is going there. We've already separated them into 2 different categories, so that's great. And now that we've removed them from the list, I think at this point is a good time to respawn them as well. So over here on our motion tab, if we scroll down to player motion, we have respawn player, which we're going to drag right under who is it. We're then respawning that player. So who is it? It is. We're not respawning them to self, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that to leave it empty. You'll see we need a spawn point object variable, which we have under our variables tab, and that is the it spawn. So we'll go ahead and drag that over and drop it there. And now we have teleported the person who's it to their location. The other people, we're going to teleport using a while loop. Now, traditionally, while loops are very difficult, but I find that this method is actually one of the easiest ways to use a while loop, far superior to any other method I've used. And so what we're going to do is go over to the top of our logic tab, and we want to find out while something is greater. So I'm grabbing the greater than symbol. And what we're checking is the length of the iterator plids list. So over here, we actually happen to have this. So I'm going to just grab length of and thumbstick that to the right into our A slot. So while the length of the iterator player IDs is greater than, you guessed it, 0. So as long as there's players in this list, we need to keep going through it. Now, the question is, which player do we select from this list at first? Okay, so if you haven't used a while loop before, what it's going to do is it's going to do the thing until this is no longer true. And so if that doesn't make sense, like finish finish watching this little section here, it's only gonna be another couple minutes, and then go back and rewatch it, might make a little more sense. So while the length of the iterator player ID list is greater than 0, we need to first and foremost respawn that player. So I could go to the motion tab and grab it again, but I think the easiest method is actually just to grab respawn, who is it, from here, and thumbstick to the right. Notice I am indenting it. The white bar is indented. I can then thumbstick to the right to duplicate it. Now we're not going to select who is it. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that out of here. And we're not selecting the it spawn. This is just a really quick way to grab a code block from above and bring it here. Now what we're going to do is select a specific player from the list. If we go down to the list section, you can see there is get item from list, which we've used a little bit earlier, and we'll drop that into player. You'll remember that get item from list allows us to select a number. And you'll also remember that list has positions starting at 0, and when you remove somebody, it shifts the list down. It doesn't just like keep the list at the same length. The length is shorter, so the item has been removed. So if you had 0, 1, 2, and 3 as the example before, we select 3, or let's say 2, 0, 1, and then 3. It's no longer 2's no longer there. There's only 3 people left. 3's been shifted into the 2 slot. So now it's only 0, 1, and 2, where 2 was previously 3. Okay, hopefully that makes some sense. But what that means is we can always select item 0 because they're always going to get shifted down into the 0 position. So we grab 0 from here, get item 0 from the iterator player ID list, and we're going to spawn them to the other spawn. So under variables tab, grab other spawn, dropping it in here. So we're going to respawn that player to other spawn. Fantastic. Okay, now that we've respawned them, we need to remove them. Now this previous remove item required us to put in the exact player, and then we'd have to specify the player. Way too much work. Way easier method, just go to the operators tab where you can find remove item at index from list. And if we drop that under respawn, we can now supply a number value. How easy is that? Just duplicate those 2 in, and now we're just removing item 0. And here's the crazy part. That's it. You're done. I mean, you've done it. It's quite simply that simple. So what's happening here is it goes through the first time and it selects the first person at iterator 0. And then it goes through a second time and it selects the next person. And then it selects the next person and it selects the next person. And so this is really, really quite fantastic. Let's go ahead and try it out and make sure it works. I'm trying to see if there's anything else we needed to do, but we're done. I have a couple things that I'd like to show you that take this a step further, but really, if you're following along with this in Horizon, in the future or now, really great work. Seriously, this is a big one. I know it's only 9% script capacity, but this really is a big one, and it's got so much powerful stuff in it, so great job. Seriously, pat yourself on the back. Fantastic work. Oh, 3 seconds. Go, 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 go. Did I make it? Did I make it? I didn't make it. I didn't make it. I wasn't fast enough. Okay, let's go. Stop the world, clear, and hit play. Okay, we have 60 seconds, you guys. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Psh, I should get teleported. Oh, I did something wrong. This happens, but I'm surprised. What did I do wrong? Okay. Oh, I know what I did wrong. Okay, if you caught this, great job. But if we open the trigger, you'll remember I didn't fill it out all the way. We still have a lot of things left to put in. The ticking sound, the gong sound, the 2 spawn points. Oh, that's embarrassing. All right, so we're going to open up the properties panel for spawn point for the other spawn, and then we'll drag that into other spawn. Fantastic. And we got to go do that a few more times. So I'll go over here, drag this over, and drag spawn point into it spawn. There we go. And then we need the tick sound. So we'll go to our build sounds. And if you just search tick, they have a pretty good one. I remember. That's definitely not what I wanted. You know, I kind of like the kick drum. It's definitely different, but it sounds nice. Okay, so kick drum for our tick sound. Nice. And we're not going to make it global. The distance is way too low. There we go. Oh, it's already working. Nice. Okay, we'll go ahead and place this over here so you kind of get this kind of intense sound. And then we need a gong, which I believe they have a gong in here. Gong. There it is. Nice. Perfect. Open up that properties panel again. Where'd it go? There it is. Okay, and gong sound goes into here. There we go. And we'll go and make the distance on this one around the same. And place that right here. Okay, now for the purposes of this, I am going to speed this up because we waited so long last time. We're going to speed this up to 11. And now, here we go. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, and it worked. Since I'm the only one here, it spawned me here. And then it would have spawned the other person there. Man, that was so great. The sound effects really helped that. Like they really did. So that was awesome. And maybe at this point, you're starting to realize some of the things that we're going to be fixing in here. Okay, so we've got all these things wired up. The countdown time, we're going to set back to 61. And I want to talk to you about some ways we can make this better. So 61, fantastic. What's happening here that's a problem? Well, what's happening that's a problem is that the countdown is going to work even if there's no players in the list. And so we only want to send the select player event if there are no player, like if there are players in the list. And so what we're going to do is say if the, and we're going to go to the top of this. Remember that greater than symbol we were using earlier? So we're going to say if the length of, so we'll go back down to list, or we can grab length of list, put that in the A slot. If the length of the players in the trigger is greater than 1, meaning there has to be at least 2 players in the trigger, then we do the things, because you can't really play a game without 2 people. So I know there's only one of me here, but this is how we're going to set it up. You're going to have to trust me that it works. But what we're going to do is say set the iterator player list, player ID list, select player, and then send that. And that's pretty much it, right? Like that gong goes off, all of this happens. In fact, I'm going to put the gong sound in here so it doesn't play. And then the other thing that we're going to fix here is we're going to come down and say else. Like if there are not enough players, we're going to send countdown to self again after 1 second and just keep looping. The big difference is instead of setting countdown to -1, we need to set it back to 60. So I've grabbed that set to from the top there where we originally set the countdown, and we're going to set countdown to, and we're going to call this new number variable countdown start value, and then click confirm. We're also going to set this to 61, and then we're going to drag this into here. So now we've set countdown to countdown start value, and then up here at world start, we're also going to set this. So we're going to set countdown to countdown start value, and now we have created a way that it will loop back to the beginning if there are no players. So like if there's just not enough people, it's just going to start over. Like pretty straightforward. And there you got it. Pretty nice. Okay, I think that's all the things I wanted to do. Anything like you guys have questions about here? Any like requests about this that you want to kind of see done? If so, please let me know. Otherwise, we're going to make this into an asset, bundle it up, and get it added to the essentials bundle because this is pretty sweet. Pretty sweet indeed.